Throughout history, the nomadic peoples of the Eurasian steppes have played pivotal roles in shaping the world's greatest empires. From the Seljuk Turks, who rose to challenge the Byzantine Empire, to the Mongol horde of Genghis Khan that stretched its power across much of Asia and Europe, these nomads were often the untamed forces that changed the course of history. But few have left a legacy as powerful or as mysterious as the Huns. In the mid-4th century, the Huns pushed westward from the Eurasian steppe, triggering a series of events that eventually led to the fall of the Western Roman Empire. Under the fierce leadership of Attila, the Huns became a symbol of unrelenting power, their name invoking fear throughout the Roman world. However, despite their undeniable impact, the origins of the Huns remain one of the most enigmatic questions in history. Were they European? Were they Asian? Or were they both? In this video, we will embark on a journey to uncover the mysterious origins of the Huns and examine the cultural, military, and religious influences that shaped their society. The origins of the Huns are, by all accounts, shrouded in mystery. Ancient sources, often written by Roman historians or those from other settled civilizations, painted the Huns as little more than barbaric invaders from the east. These sources described the Huns as savages who suddenly appeared on the fringes of Roman territory, wreaking havoc and leaving destruction in their wake. But where did they really come from? The true story of the Huns is far more complex than these simplistic depictions. Many historians believe the Huns hailed from the vast, treeless steppes of Central Asia. This region, stretching from the Ural Mountains in the west to the Altai Mountains in the east, is home to a wide array of nomadic peoples. However, pinpointing the exact origin of the Huns is difficult. One popular theory connects them to the Xiongnu, an ancient nomadic empire that had clashed with the Han Dynasty in China centuries before the Huns appeared in Europe. But does this theory hold water? Were the Huns directly descended from the Xiongnu, or were they merely inspired by them? Let's explore these ideas further. The Xiongnu were a nomadic people who inhabited the northern regions of China and Mongolia during the 3rd century BCE. They were a powerful force that engaged in constant warfare with the Han Dynasty, dominating the northern borders for centuries. Their military prowess, vast armies, and unique tactics made them one of the most formidable groups of the ancient world. Some scholars suggest that the Huns were, in fact, the descendants of the Xiongnu. This theory gained traction largely due to the similarities between the two groups, including their way of life, military strategies, and even the structure of their societies. The Xiongnu, like the Huns, were expert horsemen, known for their use of mounted archers in warfare. This style of combat would later become a hallmark of Hunnic military strategy. The Xiongnu also organized themselves into large, multi-ethnic confederations, much like the Huns did when they crossed into Europe. The question, however, remains, were the Huns the direct descendants of the Xiongnu, or were they simply another nomadic tribe from the same region who adopted similar tactics? While the connection between the two is compelling, it is important to consider the complexities of nomadic confederations. These groups often consisted of many different peoples with varying ethnic backgrounds, and the Huns were no different. By the time the Huns moved westward into Europe, they had already absorbed many different tribes along their journey. By the time the Huns appeared in Eastern Europe, their empire had expanded across vast stretches of land. They had conquered territories in Central Asia, and by the early 4th century, they had reached the Ural Mountains, just to the east of the Caspian Sea. This marked the beginning of their westward migration, and they were now in direct contact with the Goths and other Germanic tribes who inhabited the lands of modern-day Ukraine and southern Russia. The reasons for the Huns' migration westward remain unclear, but several factors likely contributed. First, the Huns were pushed out of their homeland by the expansion of the Han Chinese to the east. The Xiongnu had been in constant conflict with the Han Dynasty for centuries, and after their empire collapsed, the remnants of the Xiongnu moved westward. It is also believed that climate change and pressure from other nomadic groups in the region may have played a role in forcing the Huns to migrate further west. Whatever the exact cause, by the early 5th century, the Huns had begun to overrun the Goths, the Alans, and other tribes in Eastern Europe. They were a terrifying force, known for their lightning-fast raids and brutal tactics. As they pushed into Roman territory, the Huns set off a chain of events that would eventually bring the Roman Empire to its knees. The Roman Empire was no stranger to conflict with barbarian groups. Over the centuries, the Romans had faced off against the Gauls, the Celts, the Germanic tribes, and many others. But the Huns were unlike any of these previous enemies. The Huns brought with them a new kind of warfare, one that was mobile, swift, and terrifyingly effective. At the height of their power, under the leadership of Attila, the Huns became the most formidable military force in Europe. Their cavalry was unmatched, capable of moving quickly across vast distances and striking before their enemies even had time to prepare. Their mounted archers, skilled in shooting arrows while riding at full speed, were devastating in battle. The Romans, accustomed to fighting stationary infantry armies, found themselves ill-prepared for the hit-and-run tactics of the Huns. But the Huns did not simply rely on their superior military tactics. They were also skilled diplomats and manipulators. Attila, known as the Scourge of God, used a combination of intimidation, alliances, and terror to achieve his goals. He successfully divided the Roman Empire, playing the Eastern and Western Roman empires against each other. In 451 AD, Attila marched his army into Gaul, where he famously faced the Roman general Aetius at the Battle of the Catalaunian Plains. While the battle was a stalemate, it marked the height of Hunnic power. Attila's rise to power was as dramatic as it was ruthless. After the death of his father, the Hun Empire was divided between Attila and his brother, Bleda. However, Attila quickly asserted his dominance by murdering his brother and becoming the sole ruler of the Huns. Under Attila's leadership, the Huns became a well-organized military powerhouse, and their reputation for savagery spread throughout the Roman world. Attila's military genius was matched only by his political acumen. He formed alliances with various barbarian tribes, including the Goths and the Vandals, and used his position to manipulate Roman leaders. He knew how to exploit the weaknesses of his enemies, and he was not afraid to use terror as a tool. Cities that resisted him were destroyed, their inhabitants slaughtered or enslaved. The Roman historian Priscus, who visited Attila's court in 449 AD, described him as both terrifying and charismatic, an unpredictable leader who ruled with an iron fist but also maintained a certain respect for his own people. The Huns were famous for their cavalry, and it is their military tactics that have immortalized them in the annals of history. The Huns were not simply horse riders, they were masters of mounted warfare. Their cavalry units were incredibly fast and agile, capable of crossing vast distances with ease. The Huns used a variety of tactics, including feigned retreats, ambushes, and surprise attacks, to overwhelm their enemies. One of the most effective tactics the Huns employed was the use of mounted archers. These archers were capable of shooting accurately while riding at full gallop, making them highly dangerous on the battlefield. The Huns also used their horses to create confusion and disorder among their enemies. Their speed and mobility allowed them to strike swiftly, retreat just as quickly, and then return to attack again before their opponents could regroup. In addition to their cavalry, the Huns also used a variety of siege techniques when attacking fortified cities. While the Huns were known for their mobile warfare, they were also capable of laying siege to cities and forcing them to surrender. They used a combination of intimidation, cutting off supplies, and psychological warfare to break their enemies' will to fight. As powerful as the Huns were, their empire did not last forever. After Attila's death in 453 AD, the Huns experienced a period of fragmentation and civil war. Attila's sons fought for control of the Hunnic Empire, but the lack of strong leadership left the empire vulnerable. Factions within the empire divided, and the Huns began to lose their dominance in Europe. The Huns' decline also coincided with the rise of other nomadic groups. The Gepids, a Germanic tribe, took advantage of the Huns' weakening position, and soon after, the Ostrogoths and Visigoths began to challenge the Huns' hold on the region. The Western Roman Empire, which had long been besieged by barbarian invasions, eventually fell in 476 AD, though the Huns had already played a significant role in its decline. So, were the Huns European or Asian? The answer is more complex than simply labeling them as one or the other. While the Huns undeniably made a lasting impact on Europe, their origins lie far to the east, in the vast steppes of Central Asia. The The Huns were shaped by the nomadic traditions of the Eurasian steppes, influenced by cultures like the Xiongnu and other Central Asian peoples. Yet, as they expanded into Europe, the Huns adapted their tactics and formed alliances with other barbarian tribes, making them an integral part of European history. In the end, the Huns were both European and Asian. They were a product of the Great Eurasian Steppe, a land where cultures, peoples, and empires collided and intertwined. Their legacy lives on, not only in the history of Europe, but in the military strategies and cultural exchanges that shaped the world.